I stood frozen outside my own living room door, my hand trembling on the handle, listening to my husband laugh at me. "She's my personal ATM machine," Kelvin said, and I heard his sister Nadine giggle in response. "The fool actually thinks she's building our future. Can you imagine?" My shopping bag slipped from my fingers. Inside were groceries I'd bought with money earned from my third job that day. It was 11:30 at night. I had been awake since 4:45 that morning. "She looks terrible though," Nadine said, her voice dripping with mock concern. "Like someone who hasn't slept in months." "That's her problem. I didn't ask her to turn herself into a workhorse." The words hit me like physical blows, each one landing precisely where I was already wounded. I wanted to burst through that door. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stood there in the dim hallway of our apartment, listening to the two people I had sacrificed everything for mock my exhaustion. Let me take you back to how this began. 18 months earlier, Kelvin had come home with his face gray with fear, trembling as he confessed that his electronics importation business had collapsed. He owed 4.2 million naira to suppliers, banks, and private lenders. Some of those private lenders were not the kind of people who accepted delays or excuses. They were the kind who made examples of debtors in ways that ended up on the evening news. "I'm finished, Iris," he'd said, weeping into my shoulder. "They're going to destroy me. My name, my future, everything." I held him that night and made a promise. I would fix this. I would save us. Within 2 weeks, I had restructured my entire life. My primary job as an administrative assistant paid decently, but it would take years to clear that kind of debt on a single salary. So I added a morning catering service, preparing meals for office workers before dawn. I took an afternoon position as a teaching assistant at a private school. I worked evenings at a retail store in the shopping district. On weekends, I served as an event usher at weddings and conferences. And late at night, when my body screamed for rest, I worked as an online transcriptionist, converting audio files to text until my eyes burned and my fingers cramped. 5 jobs. 7 days a week. Sometimes 19 hours a day. I watched the debt shrink month by month. 3.8 million. 3.2 million. 2.9 million. Each payment felt like a small victory, like I was building something solid beneath our feet. But somewhere along the way, Kelvin stopped meeting my eyes when I came home. He stopped asking how my day was. He stopped saying thank you. The warning signs were there. I was too exhausted to read them properly. He began sleeping until noon while I left the house in darkness. He started spending his afternoons with Nadine, who had moved into our spare room, temporarily after a breakup. She was 24, unemployed, and had apparently decided that I existed to serve her. "Iris, the bathroom is dirty. Can you clean it when you get back?" she'd call out as I rushed to my morning catering job. "Iris, I'm craving Chinese food. Can you pick some up on your way home tonight?" "Iris, your clothes are so old-fashioned. Don't you care how you look?" And when I tried gently to suggest that maybe she could help around the house since she was home all day, Kelvin would step in like a protective wall. "She's family, Iris. She's going through something. Have some compassion." Compassion. I was working myself into an early grave, and he wanted me to have more compassion. 3 weeks before that night in the hallway, I had come home at midnight to find them watching a movie, surrounded by expensive takeout containers. Kelvin was wearing a watch I'd never seen before. Nadine had shopping bags from boutiques I couldn't afford even to walk past. Where did all this come from? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Kelvin didn't even pause the movie. "I'm trying to rebuild my confidence, Iris. A man can't walk around looking defeated. People need to see I'm back on my feet. But we still owe 1.6 million naira. And we'll pay it. Stop being so controlling." Controlling. I was killing myself to save him, and I was controlling. Now, standing in that hallway, listening to them laugh at my expense, I finally understood. I wasn't his wife. I was his resource. And the moment I stopped being useful, I would become his burden. I picked up my shopping bags, turned around, and walked back down the stairs. I sat in my car in the parking lot for an hour, staring at nothing, feeling something inside me begin to crack. When I finally went back upstairs, they were asleep. I lay in bed next to Kelvin, this man I had loved, This man I had destroyed my health for. And I knew with cold certainty that something was about to break. I just didn't know yet that it would be me. The first discrepancy I noticed was small. Just 200,000 naira missing from our joint savings account. I checked the transaction history during my lunch break at the school, squinting at my phone screen in the staff room. The withdrawal had been made 4 days earlier. I hadn't taken it, which meant Kelvin had. That evening after my retail shift, I asked him about it. I tried to keep my voice neutral, non-accusatory. I was so tired of fighting. Oh, that, he said, not looking up from his phone. I needed to sort something out. Business-related. What kind of business? I thought you were still looking for opportunities. Exactly. I can't find opportunities if I look broke, Iris. You have to spend money to make money. The explanation felt hollow, but I was too exhausted to push. I had 3 more hours of transcription work ahead of me, and my body ached in places I didn't know could ache. But then I started noticing more. New clothes appearing in Nadine's wardrobe. Designer bags. Expensive perfume. Restaurant receipts left carelessly on the kitchen counter. Places that charged more for one meal than I spent on groceries for a week. Pauline, I said to my colleague during our morning break, am I going crazy? Or is something very wrong? Pauline was older than me. A woman who had survived her own difficult marriage and come out the other side stronger. She looked at me with the kind of sad knowledge that comes from experience. Iris, you're breaking yourself for someone who isn't even looking at you anymore. When last did that man appreciate anything you do? I couldn't answer. Because the truth was I couldn't remember. That weekend, while cleaning the apartment during the few hours I had off, I found receipts stuffed in Kelvin's jacket pocket. Nightclub entry fees. Hotel spa services for 2. A jewelry purchase from an expensive boutique. My hands shook as I photographed each one with my phone. When Kelvin came home that evening with Nadine, both of them carrying shopping bags and laughing about something, I was waiting at the dining table with the receipts spread out like evidence at a trial. What is this? I asked. The laughter died instantly. Kelvin's face shifted through several expressions. Surprise, calculation, then anger. You're going through my pockets now? Is this what we've become? You spent 350,000 naira in 2 weeks. On clubs. On spas. On jewelry. While I'm working 5 jobs to pay off your debts. Our debts, he corrected, his voice rising. You always say, your debts, like you're some kind of martyr. This is our marriage. Our responsibility. Then why am I the only one being responsible? Nadine stepped forward, her face twisted with contempt. Maybe if you actually took care of yourself, he wouldn't need to escape. Have you looked in a mirror lately, Iris? You look like someone's grandmother. The words landed like acid. Because she was right. I had stopped looking in mirrors months ago. I couldn't bear to see what I was becoming. Stay out of this, Nadine, I said, my voice shaking. She's family, Kelvin snapped. She has every right to speak. And maybe you should listen. You've become so obsessed with money that you've forgotten how to be a wife. I felt something break inside my chest. Not my heart. Something deeper. My sense of reality itself. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 2 in the morning, I got up for water and saw Kelvin's phone charging on the kitchen counter. He'd left it unlocked. I shouldn't have looked. But I did. The messages were all there. Conversations between Kelvin and Nadine about a family business they were planning to start. Using my savings. The money I had nearly killed myself to accumulate. They'd been planning it for weeks, discussing how much they'd need, what they'd invest in, how they'd manage it together. My name appeared exactly once in the entire thread. Kelvin. What about Iris? Nadine. What about her? She'll agree. She always does. She's too tired to fight anyway. I sat on the kitchen floor with that phone in my hands, reading those words over and over until they stopped making sense. The next morning, Trevor came by. Trevor was Kelvin's oldest friend, someone who had always been kind to me. He took one look at my face and pulled me aside while Kelvin was in the shower. This isn't right, Iris, he said quietly. Whatever is happening here, this isn't right. You know that. I don't know anything anymore, Trevor. Yes, you do. You're just afraid to act on it. He left before Kelvin emerged, but his words stayed with me. That afternoon, during my lunch break at the retail store, I made a decision. I walked to the bank and withdrew 850,000 naira from our joint savings account. Everything that remained. I opened a new account at a different bank, one only in my name, and deposited every kobo. Then I went back to work, my hands steady for the first time in months. I knew what was coming. I knew there would be an explosion. But I also knew I couldn't let them take the last piece of myself I had left. When the storm arrived, I would be ready. I heard them before I saw them. The shouting started while I was still climbing the stairs to our apartment, my body heavy with exhaustion from another endless day. Kelvin's voice was a roar of fury. Nadine's was sharp with accusation. The door slammed open before I could reach it. "Where is the money?" Kelvin demanded, his face twisted with rage. "Where the hell is our money?" I stepped inside slowly, setting down my bag. My heart was pounding, but my voice came out steady. "It's safe." "Safe? You emptied our account. 850,000 naira gone. Do you know what you've done?" Nadine appeared behind him, her phone in her hand, her face flushed. "We were at the bank this morning. They said the account was emptied yesterday. You stole from us." Something hot and terrible rose in my chest. All the months of exhaustion, of humiliation, of being treated like a machine that existed only to produce money. All of it came flooding up. I stole. My voice was quiet, but it cut through their shouting. I stole my own money. Money I earned working 5 jobs while you two sat here spending it like lottery winners. "That was family money," Kelvin said, stepping closer. "Joint account money. You had no right." "I had every right." The words exploded out of me. "I have been killing myself for 18 months. I wake up at 4:45 every morning. I work 19 hours a day. I come home at midnight to an empty bed and a dirty kitchen, and a house full of people who treat me like their servant. And you dare talk to me about rights? You're hysterical," Nadine said, her lip curling. "This is exactly why." "Shut up." I turned on her, and she actually stepped back. "You contributed nothing. You live in my house, eat my food, wear clothes bought with my money, and you have the audacity to call me a thief." "She's my sister," Kelvin said, his voice dangerous. "Watch how you speak to her. She's a parasite. And so are you." His hand shot out and grabbed my arm. Not violently, but firmly enough to make his point. That money was for our future. For a business. For something that could actually help us instead of you working yourself to death. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. "Let me go." "Not until you tell me where the money is." I said, "Let me go." Something in my voice made him release me. I stepped back, creating distance, my whole body trembling with rage and grief. "Your future," I said slowly. "That's what you called it. Your future. I read your messages, Kelvin. You and Nadine planning a business with my money. Deciding how you'd spend it. Discussing how I was too tired to fight. Too broken to care." His face went pale. "Iris, do you know what you called me? When you were laughing with your sister 3 nights ago in our living room. You called me your personal ATM machine. You said I was a fool who thought I was building our future. And she laughed. You both laughed at how tired I looked. At how much I'd sacrificed. You laughed." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Nadine's hand connected with my face. The slap wasn't hard enough to knock me down, but it was hard enough to make my ears ring. I stood there, tasting blood from my split lip, staring at this woman who lived in my house, wore my generosity like a costume, and had just struck me. "You selfish woman," Nadine hissed. "You wicked, bitter woman. You have no respect. No understanding of family. No." "Get out," I said. "What?" "Get out of my house. Now. Tonight. Take your bags and your entitlement and your judgment and get out." "You can't throw her out," Kelvin said, his voice rising again. "This is my house too. Then you leave with her." I turned to face him fully. This man I had loved. This man I had destroyed myself for. Because I'm done. I'm done being useful. I'm done being your resource. I'm done carrying people who would rather mock me than thank me. "You're being dramatic," he said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. I'm being awake. For the first time in 18 months, I'm actually awake. And I see you clearly now, Kelvin. Both of you. I walked to our bedroom, pulled out my already packed bag, and headed for the door. Where are you going? Kelvin demanded. Somewhere I can breathe. If you walk out that door. What? You'll leave me? You'll stop loving me? You already did that, Kelvin. Months ago. I just didn't notice because I was too busy saving you. His final words followed me down the hallway. You were only useful when you were useful. Now you're just bitter. I stopped at the top of the stairs, those words burning into my memory. Then I continued walking. Pauline answered her phone on the second ring. Come, she said simply after I explained. You're safe here. That night, lying in Pauline's guest room, I cried for the first time in months. Not gentle tears. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere so buried I'd forgotten it existed. My phone buzzed constantly. Kelvin calling. Kelvin texting. Then the texts turned venomous. You've destroyed this family. You're selfish and cruel. I hope you're happy with yourself. You'll regret this. I turned off my phone and stared at the ceiling until dawn, feeling hollow and free and terrified all at once. My marriage was over. I knew that. What I didn't know yet was that the consequences were only just beginning. The war started online. Within 3 days of my leaving, Kelvin's mother called me, then his uncle, then cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. The story they'd been told was consistent. I had abandoned my husband in his time of need. I had stolen family money. I had shown my true character as a selfish, modern woman with no respect for marriage. How could you leave him like this? His mother demanded on the phone. After everything we welcomed you into our family. This is how you repay us. I hung up without responding. What could I say that they would believe? The WhatsApp messages came next. Family group chats I'd been added to suddenly filled with subtle accusations, Bible verses about forgiveness and wifely duties, posts about the decay of marriage in modern society. I watched it all from Pauline's house, feeling numb. You need to tell your side, Pauline said on the 5th day. They're destroying your reputation while you stay silent. What's the point? They've already decided who I am. Then change their minds. Show them the truth. I didn't want to. Some part of me still wanted to protect Kelvin, to keep our private shame private. But then Trevor called. Iris, he's telling everyone you cleaned out your joint savings and abandoned him without explanation. People are saying terrible things about you. If you have proof of what really happened, you need to show it. Now, that night I organized everything. Bank statements showing the debt payments I'd made over 18 months. Screenshots of my work schedules, 5 jobs overlapping, barely any sleep. Photos of the receipts I'd found, the luxury purchases made while I starved myself. And the text messages between Kelvin and Nadine discussing their business plans using my money. I wrote a single post. No drama. No accusations. Just facts with evidence attached. For 18 months, I worked 5 jobs to pay off debts my husband accumulated. During that time, while I was working 19 hours a day, money began disappearing from our savings. When I questioned this, I was called controlling and told I had forgotten how to be a wife. I discovered plans to use my remaining savings for a business I was never consulted about. When I secured that money in a separate account, I was physically assaulted and verbally abused. I left to protect what little of myself remained. These are the facts. These are the receipts. Judge accordingly. I posted it to Facebook, to the family WhatsApp groups, to every place they had tried to slander me. Then I waited. The response was swift and violent. The same relatives who had condemned me went silent. Some deleted their previous messages. Others sent private apologies I didn't bother to read. But the public response was what mattered. People started sharing my post. Friends I hadn't heard from in years reached out with support. Women shared their own stories of being used and discarded. And the judgment turned on Kelvin like a tidal wave. Shameless man. He's a parasite. Imagine laughing at your wife while she kills herself for you. His friends began distancing themselves. Relatives who had defended him stopped taking his calls. The respect he'd been so desperate to maintain evaporated overnight. Trevor told me later that Kelvin had tried to do damage control, to explain his side, but every attempt made things worse. Because there was no explaining away bank statements. There was no justifying text messages that showed his callousness. There was no defense for what he'd done. 2 weeks after my post, Kelvin showed up at Pauline's house. I watched from the window as he stood at the gate, looking smaller somehow. Diminished. He held flowers, which would have been laughable if they weren't so pathetic. Pauline went down to speak to him. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw him break. His shoulders shook. His hands covered his face. He was crying. He wants to apologize, Pauline said when she came back up. He says he didn't understand what he was doing. That he was under pressure. That Nadine manipulated him. That he wants to make things right. Tell him no. Iris. Tell him no. She went back down. I watched Kelvin's face crumple when she delivered the message. He stood there for several more minutes, as if hoping I would change my mind, then finally walked away. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No pity. Just emptiness where love used to live. Trevor came to see me a few days later. He's falling apart, Trevor said, sitting across from me in Pauline's living room. Lost 2 job opportunities because word got around about what happened. Nadine went back to her own life the moment things got difficult. He's alone. Good, I said flatly. Iris, I'm not asking you to forgive him. But I thought you should know. The consequences are hitting him hard. They should hit him harder. He destroyed me, Trevor. Systematically, deliberately, while I was saving his life. And he laughed about it. Trevor nodded slowly. You're right. You're absolutely right. I've known him a long time. I've never seen him like this. You've never seen me like this either. Broken. Exhausted. Humiliated. But nobody cared about that when it was happening, did they? He had no answer for that. After he left, I sat in the silence of Pauline's guest room and felt something strange. Not quite peace, but something close to it. I had told the truth. I had protected myself. I had survived. But the question that haunted me in the dark hours was this. Would anything I'd done make a difference? Would Kelvin truly understand what he'd destroyed? Or would he simply find someone new to use? I didn't know yet that answers were coming. Permanent ones. 6 months passed like a slow exhale. I moved into my own small apartment, nothing fancy but mine. I kept 2 of my 5 jobs, the ones that paid best and demanded least. My body slowly remembered what rest felt like. The shadows under my eyes faded. My hair grew back thicker where stress had made it thin. I used the 850,000 naira to start the catering business I'd always dreamed of. Small at first, just weekend events, but it grew. Word spread about my food, my reliability, my prices. People started calling me by my name again instead of seeing me as someone's wife, someone's workhorse, someone's ATM machine. I saw a therapist. A kind woman named Dr. Amara who didn't judge when I told her about the voices in my head that still said I'd failed. That I'd given up too easily, that good wives endure. You didn't fail, Dr. Amara said during one session. You survived. There's a difference. I was learning to believe her. News of Kelvin reached me in fragments, carried by mutual acquaintances who thought I should know. He'd moved back to his parents' house in Enugu. He couldn't find stable work, his reputation preceding him wherever he went. Friends who used to admire him now saw him as a cautionary tale. Nadine had gotten married to someone with money and moved to Abuja. She didn't help her brother. She barely called. I felt nothing when I heard these things. Not satisfaction. Not pity. Just a distant acknowledgement that consequences were real. Then, on a Tuesday morning in my new apartment, a letter arrived. The envelope was addressed in handwriting I recognized. Inside was 6 pages front and back, every space filled with Kelvin's careful script. I made tea before I read it. I needed something to hold. Something warm to ground me. The letter was an apology. Not the kind that tries to excuse or explain away. The real kind that names every hurt, every betrayal, every cruelty specifically and without defense. He wrote about the debt, how shame had made him weak. How watching me work while he did nothing had made him resent me instead of thanking me. How Nadine had fed his worst instincts, But he'd chosen to listen. How he'd convinced himself that mocking me was easier than facing his own failures. He wrote about the night I left, how her slap had shocked him into silence but not action. How he'd told himself I was overreacting, being dramatic, until the evidence I posted showed him his own ugliness reflected back. I destroyed the only person who loved me enough to nearly destroy herself for me, he wrote. I see that now. I saw it the moment you walked out the door, but I was too proud, too foolish, too broken to admit it. You were gold, Iris. Pure gold. And I treated you like something disposable. The letter went on. Page after page of acknowledgement, of regret, of understanding that came too late. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't ask me to come back. He simply asked if I could find any peace, if I was healing, if I was happy. I don't expect a response, the final paragraph read. I don't deserve one. I just needed you to know that I see what I did. I see what I lost. And I will carry this understanding for the rest of my life. I hope you're building something beautiful for yourself. You always deserve beautiful things. I'm sorry I made you fight so hard just to survive. I set the letter down and stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope, and placed it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Not because I was cruel, but because some doors, once closed, need to stay closed. Some lessons can only be learned through permanent loss. 3 months later, I catered an event at a hotel in Victoria Island. It was my biggest booking yet, a corporate anniversary with 200 guests. I'd hired help, rented equipment, planned every detail for weeks. When it was over and the clients praised my food, shook my hand, promised referrals, I stood in the kitchen surrounded by my small team, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not in surviving. In thriving. Pauline was there, helping with cleanup even though I'd told her she didn't have to. Look at you, she said, smiling. Remember when you could barely lift your head? Look at you now. I looked around the kitchen, at the evidence of my work, my vision, my success. All of it built from the ashes of the worst period of my life. That night, I saw Kelvin's face on my phone. Not a call, but a photo someone had tagged on social media. He was at a family gathering, sitting alone at the edge of the frame while others laughed and celebrated. He looked older, tired, diminished. I studied that photo for a moment, then scrolled past. Some people don't know the value of gold until they've thrown it away. And by then it's too late. Not because the gold is gone, but because they've proven they never deserved it in the first place. I blocked the account, deleted the notification, and went to bed in my small apartment with its paid rent and its quiet peace and its future full of possibilities I was building with my own hands. The marriage was over. The debt was paid. The betrayal was behind me. And I was finally, terrifyingly, beautifully free. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. Some trust, once shattered, cannot be glued back together. Some consequences are permanent, not as punishment, but as protection. I had learned the hardest lesson of all. That loving someone is not the same as sacrificing yourself. That devotion without respect is destruction. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is save yourself. Kelvin would carry his regret forever. That was his burden to bear. I would carry my freedom. And that finally was mine.